The Textile Room Tour. This room reflects our county's history and heritage through textiles. In the beginning, the American quilt was strictly a utilitarian object, needed to provide warm covers for beds or hangings for doors and windows. These quilts were so connected with everyday life of the pioneer families that no records for the very early ones exist. History tells us very little about the patchwork quilt before 1750. Through quilts, women express their sense of artistry and patience. There are over 1,000 names of recognized patterns and numerous names for the quilting designs. Many early quilts are cherished possessions of great-great-granddaughters. The Clinton County Historical Society has over 50 quilts in our collection dating from the early 1800s to the late 1900s. Portraits near the door are of Sarah and Isaac Harvey. They were done by a young Eli Harvey on commission to earn money for art school. Sarah and Isaac were Quakers living in Clinton County. Isaac felt that the Lord spoke to him one day in a field and told him to speak to the President of the United States regarding the situation of enslavement of African Americans. Sarah and Isaac packed up their belongings and took a train from Wilmington to Washington, D.C. They were able to acquire a half-an-hour meeting with President Abraham Lincoln in 1861 or 1862. They received a meeting minute that was brought back to their Quaker church that was signed and dated by Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln then, following his meeting with them, later signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Now, this is not to say that they were the only influential Americans to speak to the president on the situation of slavery, but that they were influential Clinton Countyans who spoke their mind and held beliefs against enslavement of people. There is a statue in their honor and memory located on the campus of Wilmington College. It is said to have been created to their likeness, height, and what they wore on their journey to see Abraham Lincoln. The statue is located near Watson Library on the campus of Wilmington College. The Sabina folding loom located in the room was created by Garnet January, originally from Sabina. He and his wife Marjorie demonstrated weaving in their retirement. Many of their visitors expressed the desire for a loom, but had no place to put such a large piece of equipment as the Januaries had. In order to fulfill this need, Garnet designed the Sabina folding loom, designed to be as compact and light as possible and able to fold easily while leaving the weaving undisturbed. In 1944, the Januaries opened Loomcraft Studio here in Wilmington and taught classes at Wilmington College. Mr. January also designed inkle bed looms, small belt looms that weave up to 4 inches wide, and other accessories. January's creations were used in schools, hospitals, health agencies, missionaries in Burma and Korea, and by weavers in Mexico, Ortega, Colombia, and Haiti. An interesting commission of the Sabina folding loom was to design and weave 12 placemats and napkins for the Ohio sesquicentennial at the Governor's Mansion in 1953. If you turn your attention near the fireplace, you'll see a variety of buttons. The oldest buttons ever found have been dated to about 3000 BC. In 1861, Britain's Queen Victoria popularized the black glass or jet buttons. Many of the buttons you see in our collection are in this style. In the beginning of the 20th century, fancy buttons made a comeback with colors, pictures, engraving, and designs. During the Depression and World War II, collecting novelty buttons became a favorite pastime because of their low cost. Buttons were often collected and artistically displayed. Today, buttons have become more and more functional and less decorative. The button display over the mantel is a memorial to the early settlers of Clinton County. The collection contains either buttons that were brought into the county and neighboring communities by the settlers in the early 1800s, or were given by descendants of such settlers to honor their pioneering ancestors. Each button you see represents an individual person. Most of the buttons were originally given to the Smith sisters, Effie, Anna, and Clara Smith of Martinsville, Ohio. Clara Smith composed the display and documented the settlers in an accompanying notebook. It was donated to the Society in 1970. Woven fabrics are found in archaeological sites dating to prehistoric times. However, before one can weave fabric, one must spin thread, which is essentially twisting together suitable fibers. Eventually, the spinning wheel developed so that spinning and winding could be done in one step. There are two types of spinning wheels, the wheel-driven spindle and the pulley-driven spindle. The great wheel is wheel-driven and also called the muck wheel or long wheel. These were used for spinning wool. Pulley-driven wheels were used to spin flax. Spinners needed to make lots of thread. It took 48,000 yards to weave 10 yards of kerchief linen 30 inches wide. At the end of a day's work at the spinning wheel, a spinner could produce about a mile of thread. If you'll turn your attention to the Quaker abolitionist quilt hanging on the wall, this Quaker quilt was made in the 1840s and signed by women living in Quaker communities in Newport, Indiana, and Clinton County, Ohio. All of the quilt signers were active in the anti-slavery movement of the 1840s and 1850s. For their activities, they were asked to leave the Society of Friends. Although the Quakers did not believe in slavery, they often did not want their members to take an active role in emancipation of slaves. One of the main reasons for the earlier migration into Ohio and Indiana by Quakers from the East Coast was to remove themselves from the disruptive influence of war, violence, and slavery in the South. Virginia military land grants were offered to American Revolution soldiers instead of paying for their service in the war. To gain back some of their funds, these soldiers sold off parts of their promised Northwestern Territory lands. Many Quakers purchased the plots in order to start a new life and maintain their practice of pacifism and anti-war beliefs. These quilt signers joined a separatist movement in the 1840s called the Indiana Yearly Meeting of Anti-Slavery Friends, which boasted about 2,000 members. Today's Hadley family of Clinton County are related to many of the quilt signers who were active in the anti-slavery sentiment. Rebecca Harvey Hadley and her 3 daughters who signed the quilt are buried in the Springfield Friends Cemetery in Clinton County. Other families featured on the quilt include the McCracken, Bailey, Coate, Rells, Bangham, Cogshaw, and others. This quilt was donated to the Society by way of a public auction in which the winning bid was over $3,000. If you look to your left, you'll notice a variety of coverlets. A coverlet is a loom-woven bed covering made of natural and colored yarns, usually cotton and wool. It is essentially complete upon removal from the loom, except for the adding on or tying off a fringe or the joining together of panels. The word coverlet is derived from a French word meaning bed cover. Many coverlets woven before 1817 had a geometric pattern. Although some weavers of this geometric pattern were women, most of the early geometric coverlets were made by professional male weavers. Until 1840, traditional floral patterns like roses and cabbage roses were used. Designs changed in about 1840. They were freer with more fancy flowers, scrolls, and Gothic architectural details. Ohio's peak production of coverlets was between 1845 and 1855. During this time, coverlets were often given as part of a dowry and as a gift to commemorate a special occasion. Coverlets were also used on railroad sleeping cars and during the American Civil War in tents and hospitals, among many other things. 2 of the coverlets within the collection were woven by Clinton County weaver Abram Allen. Many of his coverlets included the bird and cherry tree design, with Allen's version of the Golden Rule. Allen was believed to be an influential conductor on the Underground Railroad locally. He used a Liberator wagon to hide enslaved African Americans under the wagon's floorboards. He would transport them to another station or as far north as possible towards freedom when operating his coverlet business.